New Galaxy Enterprises proudly presents Threshold Radio. This is Johnny Bluestar. Welcome to Threshold, a global media event. Is the universe just a random dance of atoms, or is it a manifestation of a supremely intelligent architect? Can its purpose, or our purpose here on Earth, be adequately assessed? Can we commune with it, know its intentions, cooperate with its direction? Here, we define threshold as a gateway state of awareness, allowing mankind to cross into a place of real cognition. Threshold allows us to approach questions of higher reality through the door of experience, rather than mere belief. Welcome to Threshold, where we tear away the veil from commercial media, bringing our audience and participants into another realm of reality and enhanced communication. This is Johnny Bluestar. We're back on Threshold Radio with a frequent guest, Sarah Westall. Sarah, who's the host of Business Game Changers, a remarkable program that deals with the CEOs, public officials, and technologists who create disruption in business and government, policies that basically change our world for better or for worse. We have had one program on disruptive technologies with a strong emphasis on changes in the music and publishing industry. But we have never really tapped Sarah for a more complete accounting of what she does, i.e., entering directly, emotionally, and intellectually into the core disruptions of our whole society, which is changing at lightning speed. Being in the middle of it, being in the heart of disruption, swinging from purported zero-energy technology to the technology of the police state to the possibilities for widespread alternative currency, is a gauntlet few talk show hosts have ever walked through. Sarah, like myself and so many others in alternative media, are willing to face some very big problems without evading them like conventional media. But Sarah has and continues to take on the very biggest and creates the kind of programming that can directly communicate with listeners who are interested in connecting with the reality of change and disruption. In this sense, Sarah is a very vital messenger, and her program deserves attention. In this discussion, Sarah has chosen two very big topics, economics and politics, as well as a few smaller and related ones. As I say, Sarah's perspective is very large, encompassing areas that many have not touched or even heard of. Before we get into our two major themes, the economics and politics of disruption, Sarah, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about why you took on this massive attempt to both chronicle and analyze the major powers of business and technological disruption in our society, including the task of seeking out and talking to some of the major players in this highly sensitive area.
Well, I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. But first of all, thank you for that great introduction. I have so much passion just to figure out what's going on in this world. And I love talking to the people, the experts in different areas that can give us insight on how this change and disruption is making a difference. I come from a technology background. I used to design computer systems, and I also teach at the business school at the University of Minnesota. And I love thinking about how change and disruption is affecting society. And we're changing faster at this time of our lives than any time in history. So it's just an amazing time to be alive.
But what was the first thing that happened to you that made you start to think this way? Do you have any idea?
Well, I do. I think like this probably my whole life. I've thought more and just sat and figured and pondered things. But I built and ran a company for 10 years, and I had an issue with the bank, a bank that was shut down for fraud. And this was right in the middle of the 2008 big debacle. And I pretty much became, I was just I was just possessed almost. That's the wrong word. What word am I trying to look for? I just couldn't stop trying to figure it out. I'm very competitive, and I couldn't learn fast enough what they were doing and what was going on. And, that's a whole episode in of itself, what I went through, but it taught me a lot about the fundamentals of finance and what was going on in our country. And I was shaken, almost shaken to the core on how corrupt some of this stuff really is and how good human beings are and how disjoint that is from what's really going on with other facets of our society.
To be honest with you, this reminds me of the fact that for years I never had a savings account. And then I decided to open a savings account. and I thought, well, maybe they'll do 5%, or if it's a CD, and 3% or something like that. And then I found out it was 0.001%.
Yeah, nothing.
That really, really shocked me because I had never heard that. And that was very recently. It was like, oh my God, all this is real disruption, isn't it? Because people can't save in the normal way unless they're tying their assets to the stock market with money market.
Yeah, well, they have to tie their assets to the stock market to make sure it keeps up with inflation. But, when we were tied to the gold standard, inflation wasn't like it is today, right? They inflate to eliminate debts. So inflation, if you have a lot of debt, it's not a bad thing. If you don't have a lot of debt and you're saving a lot, then it hurts you.
Yeah. Well, that's why the Fed has a 2% target for inflation, so they can downsize their the national debt.
So too bad we're not on target. Too bad we're way over target. But
they never seem to make it. Well,
they more than make it.
I'm really happy to say that we can now deal with some of the disruptive components of politics and the economy. So let's start with the economy. I suppose one of the biggest problems with the economy is to know what it is actually like, because as far as I can see, and I pick as an example unemployment statistics, there's a lot of misinformation bandied about. I don't know, but it seems like the extent of this misinformation, which is actually disinformation, that exists in public discourse is disruptive in itself. It's a kind of a covert business policy, a political policy, and an economic policy. Is that correct?
Well, I think the disinformation, they don't want people to realize what's really going on with the economy, because if people knew, then the problem is that there's multiple facets with the problem of people knowing, and from their perspective, if people don't know and they're ignorant, they can control us and what they want us to perceive. But also we have a habit of, if we think things are bad, we tend to make things really bad.
Yes.
Does that make sense? And they know that's the pattern. And so if we think things are good, things will get better. If we think things are bad, things will get worse. And so part of managing society is getting people to think things are good, because then we'll think things are good and things will be better. When we think things are bad, we tend to make things bad, which is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, pushing back beyond what we know for a fact is deceptive information, how do you personally characterize our economy right now? Is it promising? Is it in a recession, or is it in a depression?
Well, if you look at us compared to different countries in the world, other countries are pretty much, the whole world's in a recession, and some are in a depression. And you can read the headlines of what's going on in Brazil currently with the Olympics, or you look at what's going on with the Eurozone. We are in a better shape than they are at this moment in time, but that is just, I think it's more of an illusion. Or it's temporary. We will have to have a point where we have to deal with the debts. We have to deal with the fact that there's so many dollars printed that the value of the dollar has gone to a very small amount. If you create too many dollars, then the dollar ends up being worth almost nothing. And that's what hyperinflation is. And at some point, we're going to have to deal with some of this stuff, the debt, if we have so much debt that if you raise the interest rate on what we pay for debt, it becomes a substantial part of our budget that we can't handle. So there's just the formula has gotten out of hand.
Well, we're all concerned about what's causing this, and you had a meeting with an Andrew Hoffman. Tell us a little bit about him, and let's hear a little clip of what he said.
Well, let me tell you a little bit. I have such amazing people that I interview, and he is no exception. Miles Franklin is one of the oldest and largest gold suppliers, and they're an investment house in the country. And he's the media director and a finance expert from Miles Franklin. He represents them from the media perspective. But we had a great interview and great conversation about this. But I asked him, and this is the clip, I asked him whether all of this was a grand conspiracy. Like, is there some player up there, a group of people that are manipulating everything, or whether it's not that? And this is what he said. Do you believe that's a grand conspiracy, or do you think we're just all clueless and it's just happening because we don't know what else to do?
Well, you ask very good questions, Sarah, because especially in my world, I report on alternative media things and, for instance, the manipulation of gold, which I've been talking about for 15 years and proving, because I'm a Wall Street analyst by background, so I don't just have conspiracy theories. I prove it.
Well, because I don't like conspiracy theories. I liked it to be real. Otherwise, nobody takes it seriously. Right. So I want to know, is it possible for somebody to actually, to a group of people to actually plan this, or is it just we're just so desperate and so out of control that this is what happens?
Right, and that's why this is such a great question, because in my world, I am exposed to many, many people who have theories about this, and many people say very strongly it's the elites, it's the Rothschilds, it's the Bilderbergs, it's the bankers, it's this. And look, I mean, yes, there's definitely a lot of people out there who have similar goals. Like, for instance, every one of the major Western nations has a goal of maintaining the status quo of fiat currency. But to believe they're all getting together when, first of all, they all hate each other, they don't even speak the same language, they have completely different goals, to think that a small group of people are planning this. I mean, you can't make up fiction stories about how look, like what's going on in Japan with their helicopter money. No, I believe, as I've called them, that it's just a bunch of Keystone cops. They wake up every day playing defense. The fact is, these Keystone cops happen to be armed with printing presses and care of Wall Street, some of the most diabolical modern financial and trading technology around. They can hide everything. The Fed can hide all its money printing. They can trade offshore in high frequency trading and hide what they're doing. And they're very good at manipulating markets and economic data to the point where they've been able to kick the can for a long time. But the point is, at some point, and that's how we started the call, the rubber hits the road.
But if they can hide everything and it can be not be transparent, you could hide it for a long time.
Well, that's very, very interesting, and we'll pursue this in our next segment.
Okay, well, as you heard, he thinks it's a bunch of Keystone cops, right? He thinks that everybody's always reacting to whatever's going on, and I got to say he has a lot of points to that, and what's pointing to that scenario, because he pointed out during the interview that so much of what's going on is incompetence. And how can people be planning this and it turning out the way it is? So in that way, he has a point. But I've had other people on the show, like Irvin Goldman, who was an executive at JP Morgan, and he's held CEO of different finance companies. And his view on it is there's three major players that are controlling things, and they're kind of jockeying and fighting over it. And it's the U.S., the European area, including the European Union, and then it's also China and the Eastern powers. So he's saying there's three major players that are fighting for control over our money supply and economics. And that makes a lot of sense to me. So I believe it's a combination of things. It's a combination of a bunch of Keystone cops as things happen, and players at a high level trying to fight for power and domination of this space. Because the country, the group that controls the reserve currency, which is a dollar currently, has so much power, and they want to control that.
Well, that's really interesting, and we'll be right back to discuss more elements of the disruption in our economy.
Stole from my eyes. I remember that day
My company, New Galaxy Enterprises, is a California corporation specializing in the creation of media and promotional content. We are focused on original, innovative projects that are good for humanity. These projects could be nonfiction books or novels, fictional screenplays or documentary content, websites and website content, commercial advertising content for print, audio, or video products on the internet, television, or radio, musical scores for advertising, television, or film, video, audio editing, etc. We want to promote products and projects that support the environment, encourage a healthy experience in living, developing, nurturing, and useful technology, and offering platforms for positive, socially constructive entertainment or informative, transformative media. Our experience in creating a variety of products like this is rather vast, and we offer client-based and collaborative products, as well as the opportunity of active investors to join us in the creation and promotion of proprietary products, some of which are in latter stages of development. For more information, go to www.newgalaxyenterprises.com. That's www.newgalaxyenterprises.com. If you're interested in talking to us, just fill out the contact sheet and we will get back with you.
The following is from West Side Warrior, the memoir of Ray Boylan, a Korean War veteran and crime fighter. He was there fighting in the world's coldest battlefield when the Chinese communists invaded.
Desperate squad members ran past our foxhole yelling, "Get the hell out of here, there's too many of them!" Again, we saw the Chinese soldiers charging in with opium-induced mindlessness, oblivious of our bullets. Again, we heard the bugles and whistles. Climbing out of our foxhole, Bob dropped 2 hand grenades behind us, and I threw one over my shoulder. Bullets whizzing by our heads, Bob and I became bolts of lightning flashing across the mountainside. Like a hideous film, desperate scenes like this played out on the Tokong Pass for 3 days. Sometimes I played in the scene. Sometimes I could only watch and wonder if it were real, or if I'd be suddenly jolted out of my trance by an RKO usher saying, "Hey, did you kids sneak in here?"
To acquire this book, Google westsidewarrior.boylan.kindle. Boylan is spelled Boylan. That's West Side Warrior, Boylan, Kindle.
We're back with Sarah Westall discussing the state of the economy. In your exchange with Andy Kaufman, you asked him a question that bothers most of us. What's it all about? The economy, that is, stupid. So that's kind of the Clinton answer a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, the economy it will affect all of us, right? The one thing that our politicians, in the way that they have affected and manipulated people, is they get everybody focused on social issues. And part of the reason is because people a lot of people don't think about money issues, or they think about the economy as far as it affects them on a daily basis. How expensive is their food? Can they go out and be entertained? And can they do all these things? But as far as some of this bigger stuff, and so what happens is politicians, and this is really big, this cycle in politics, is they're really getting people focused on the social issues, the Black Lives Matter. And, they do have issues, and it is a problem, and they aren't getting the jobs like others are. And, we need to fix that and get over it, finally get over some of these issues. But they get us all focused on that and not on some of these bigger issues. And so the economy's stupid is really what it's about.
Well, one of the things that is really serious about the financial crisis is the corruption there is in banking. And now you were speaking to someone named Bill Black in one of your recent interviews. Tell us a little bit about him.
Okay, well, he's amazing. He, like I said, so many of my interviews are with amazing people. He led the SEC prosecutions back in the early 90s, and they put thousands of banking executives in jail or in prison for the corruption that they were doing at that time. They really cleaned up the industry, right? I mean, they didn't totally clean it up. There's always corruption at some level, but they really made a dent in the corruption that was going on in the banking industry at that time. And then he was in charge of that. He led those prosecutions. And then he also was put in position to come up with new regulations for the industry. And, he's been out of that world for a while, but when the whole 2008 thing happened, it's like bring Benjamin Franklin back and Thomas Jefferson back and looking at our how we're running our country today. That's kind of how I'm assuming he thought about the banking scandals.
So let's hear a little bit about the things that you asked him.
criminology these days, we talk about the use of the firm as weapon and the ammunition that firms use, particularly in finance, is accounting. So this was a form of accounting fraud, and it turned out this recipe had 4 ingredients. 1, grow like crazy. 2, by making really, really, really crappy loans, but at a premium nominal yield. And we can come back to what nominal means and why that's important.
Okay.
3, while employing extreme leverage. That just means a whole lot of debt compared to your equity. And 4, while setting aside virtually no allowances for loan and lease losses, in jargon, the all provision. In other words, virtually no loss reserves for the enormous losses that were sure to come from making enormous numbers of crappy loans.
Well, from a corruption standpoint, one of the big things that he pointed out is that there's a pattern of fraud, and that's what they figured out. And this is what the clip is that pattern that they figured out. Because at first it was hard to do the prosecutions, it was hard to get to the evidence, and then once they figured out the pattern, it was easy to identify. And then it was easy to prosecute. And one thing he points out too, and it's probably not in this clip, but for sure in the interview where we discussed, is that they had more whistleblowers and more evidence with this current runaround and the corruption that's been going on since 2008 and before that than they had back in 1990. Yet nobody was prosecuted. So it wasn't that they didn't have the evidence and didn't have the material to be able to take these executives and criminals down. They didn't have the political will to do it. And that's what he is telling people and what he's pressing so much. And he's very passionate about getting his message out there because he knows he was in the thick of it.
Well, it's also because the criminality is we're so used to it. It's transparent. They do it right in front of us.
Yeah, they don't even try to hide it anymore. And it's crazy. And what they do, one of the big things is they just take a penalty. Okay, so I made $3 billion doing this fraud where we're manipulating some rate, but yet they're only going to penalize me $200 million. Okay, well, that means that this business transaction cost me $200 million.
You know, since I'm kind of an amateur stock market watcher, very amateur, I can't help but notice what a profound effect statements by the Fed or other central bankers can have on all the stock markets in the world, especially ours. How on earth did Congress give up its right to control the economy to a private institution? Now, I don't know much about the Fed, but I definitely sympathize with your point of view in an exchange you had with Michael Jones.
No, that's okay. Michael Johns is the co-founder of the Tea Party, and he was also a speechwriter for Bush, and he was had very many senior positions in different senators, and I believe he worked for a governor as well. He's pretty connected in the political world, but we talked a lot about taxes, and he's, as you know, he's co-founder of the Tea Party, so he tends to be pretty more to the right, but they're against more taxes, and so we talked a lot about what the Tea Party's for. But then we got into the Federal Reserve, and this is what this clip is about. And he gave a passionate argument on why the Federal Reserve cannot be, the control of money should not be left to Congress. And his argument is that Congress it's too sophisticated for Congress, and we do not have people in Congress that understand money enough to make these decisions. And actually, his points are valid. However, we definitely need to have a body of people that are controlled somehow through Congress. We have to figure this out because it's one thing to not have Congress who does not have the experience or expertise to actually make the decisions. It's another thing to have a rogue organization who prints money under our name, spend money under our name, makes profits under our name, and we have no idea what's going on because we can't audit them. Think of any business executive in the world that runs a company of any size. If you took away their budget and you took away all their financial stuff and said, well, you can't see the finances, but here's your budget each year that you can use. And don't bother auditing us because you don't have the right to audit us because we're private. But by the way, if we give away a couple $1 trillion, you're still going to be on the hook for it because we're doing it under your name. Who would go with that? No, there isn't an executive on the planet that would go with that. It's so obvious.
Well, it's again that criminality right on the table, because I do think depriving Congress and the rest of the United States of the right to control their currency and control their economy. And besides, what the Fed does is not the usual thing that banks do. It's gone into a completely different scenario. So I'm not sure that understanding is as much the point as not having it in the first place to understand.
Well, I think having minimal control over it would be better than nothing. I mean, it's a total rogue organization right now, right? We did a one-time audit and we found that $16 trillion was giving overseas to, foreign banks to bail them out and do different things. I don't know what happened to it now. They claim it's all been back, but who knows? We never audited them again. Yet we shut down Congress for a week for $900 billion. I mean, that's an amazing number. But we shut down Congress for a week because of $900 billion and everybody's arguing. Yet behind the scenes, they're giving away $16 trillion. It's just crazy. And the fact, when you get back to Clinton saying it's about the economy, stupid. If people can't see it's about the economy, when you think about numbers like that, why? Then what's the point? It's so obvious that this is the biggest problem we have sitting in front of us. Like I said to a friend of mine last week, we're having coffee and I'm like, all these social issues are a major issue, right? People need to be treated with respect and we treat people bad. But at the end of the day, if our currency collapses and we can't eat, or if I can't get paid to be able to pay my mortgage and, feed my kids, I don't care if the person down the street's calling me names or doesn't respect me, because I care more about feeding myself and having the basics,
It's called survival.
Yeah. And this is so tied to that.
Well, let's go and listen to this clip, because I can tell you, having heard it, it's rather dramatic.
What do you think about the Federal Reserve? Should it be audited or should it be replaced? What are you thinking about that?
There's no reason not to audit the Federal Reserve. And the only real opponents to that audit are the Federal Reserve. And one of their
They're strong, though, because it never happened.
One of their objections, I believe, is that if you look at the congressional testimony that given by the Fed by say the chair now Yellen, when Yellen goes up and talks to Congress, it's like two people talking over each other's heads. Congress does not understand the Federal Reserve at all. They do not understand it.
I would think that's true.
By the way, even that would be
true.
okay. We don't need a Congress that understands everything, as long as they understand that they don't understand everything. So, if you're like, we don't understand this, but we are going to endeavor to understand it, that's okay. But if you think you understand it and you don't even understand the most basic fundamentals of it, and then you've got someone like Janet Yellen who's going to come up who's intimately involved on a daily basis on the complexities that they don't understand, they're talking over each other's heads. And I believe that's been going on for decades. And so the Federal Reserve has become this hugely misunderstood, stigmatized institution. It should be audited, but
we have
it
to
also
audit
needs to be.
it because let's face it, if you can't,
the Fed also needs to. The Fed also needs to communicate better. They've got to be able to also, just inconsistent with what I was saying with national security and foreign policy, the American people should understand about.
Yes.
Our central banking system and how it functions.
How can any business person that runs a company of any size not be just completely annoyed with the fact that we don't know what's going on with our own money? I can't even understand how that's not obvious. Go ahead.
One of the biggest lessons I drew from over a decade in Washington D.C. in both policy circles and in government is that that when you come up into public policy, you're very well educated on fiscal policy. So within DC political culture, there's a pretty good understanding of tax policy and spending. There's very, very limited understanding of monetary policy. So if you get into, say, interbank lending or repurchase agreements or, the Fed funds rate or term auctions, interest on reserves, deposit facilities, any of this stuff is, even to economists, is an alien language.
Yep, that makes sense.
And so I think we need
But that doesn't
a much
mean
broader degree of understanding of how the system actually functions.
Because to not audit
it doesn't mean that we should audit it. Yeah, absolutely. It's entirely reasonable. But you should also understand. Yeah, but you also understand when you audit the Federal Reserve, it's not like auditing the finances of a 7-Eleven. I mean, there's
fine.
particular
That's fine, but
structure of the Fed.
But to not audit is lunacy.
It just seems to me a super preposterous situation when you have a private bank controlling the printing of fiat money and state of interest rates, and it's not directly accountable to the people, at least through their representatives, that they can actually, as I've heard before, claim independence from the federal government's control. What a shame. And we're going to come back in just a few minutes and talk a little bit more about the economy.
We must have known this place before, where waves crash cruelly on the shore, and wind carves out remorseful rules in deep shadows on silver dunes. I know your touch, your smell, your glance. This could not be some trick of chance. We whirl around this windswept beach, entranced by love beyond our reach. Your kisses never die. They live inside of me. They linger on my lips.
New Galaxy Enterprises is a media company specializing in wide-ranging content like novels, nonfiction books, screenplays, commercial advertising, web content, etc. One of our most esteemed providers is illustrator Robert W. Zalo. I work on all my most important projects like book covers, logos, web design elements with Robert. As an illustrator, he worked on the Ignatz-nominated comic book, The Expert's Guide to Killing Things That Go Bump in the Night. His skills encompass advertising, magazine illustrations, gaming, comic books, TV production, and scenic painting. His clients include Comcast, Adelphia, Haven Talent, ForceWorks, High Octane Theater, Star Creative Advertising. If you wish to contact Robert, go to JohnnyBlueStar.com and let me know. That's JohnnyBlueStar.com. For artist, illustrator Robert Zalo, an essential component of all the work we do. Maybe he can help you too.
It is the 15th century. El Tesoro de Cielo, a Spanish treasure ship, sends a scouting expedition to a strange island. Golden statues surrounding them prove the enormity of their find. Suddenly, hordes of ghoulish creatures with scaly green flesh and skeletal wings descend upon them from the sky.
What do you think of this, Rufio?
These creatures are fragile, Captain. We can take them with our swords.
They seem supernatural. Who knows what powers they possess?
Fallen angels, weakened by their treason.
My God! Are you saying they're Nephilim, the devil's host?
I'm saying, whatever they are, we can take them. Do any of you cowards dare join me?
Up against sharp knife-like nails and hideous fangs, the men's swords rip into slimy green flesh. Though black blood pours copiously from their half-naked bodies, the creatures miraculously persist. Can the crew survive this bloody, cursed battle?
Find out more by Googling The Thrice Born, a new sci-fi supernatural novel by Carlos Lopez Avery and Johnny Bluestar. Google with the words Carlos Johnny Kendall, The Thrice Born. That's Carlos Johnny Kendall, The Thrice Born.
One of the programs you created featured the author of Hoodwink and 2 different editions of Confessions of an Economic Hitman. More than most people, he has chronicled the way government and private corporations conspire to exercise an overreaching control over countries throughout the world. Let's listen to this clip and then maybe we can discuss both what he did and what it all means. Is that all right?
Yep.
Well, I think it's fair to say that economic hitmen have really created the world's first truly global empire. And it's really a corporate empire, not an American empire. It's supported by the U.S. government to a large degree, the Pentagon, the CIA, et cetera. But it's really a corporate empire. And economic hitmen work in a number of different ways, but perhaps the most generic description would be to say that we identify countries with resources our corporations covet, like oil, and then arrange huge loans to those countries from the World Bank or one of its sister organizations. However, the money doesn't actually go to the countries. Instead, it goes to our own corporations that make huge profits off building big infrastructure projects.
So, I mean, this is amazing. Here we have a government that pretends to be benign, has worked out a sort of a deal between corporations and certain people within the government to go out there to a country and offer them this wonderful opportunity to build their infrastructure, maybe irrigation and crops, or certain types of energy, like a big electrical grid that they desperately need, all sorts of things. And then they basically farm out the work to corporations in the United States, indebt these people, and then because they're in debt, they have to make tremendous concessions.
Well, they do this on purpose to be able to control them from a big picture standpoint, so we don't have to control people or control countries militarily. We control them economically through these means. So there is some strategic advantage to this. And to a certain degree, it makes sense, but we're impoverishing and holding people back. And that's where the problem is. And the countries that try to fight back and keep that from happening, we take out their leaders. That's where it's sad, right? And if you look at what's happened and you analyze what's happened in different countries, you realize that pattern really is going on. And it's disheartening. This show really bothered me. I had to think about it which is too bad. I thought I have so many uplifting shows that I do as well. And so this show with you is not as uplifting because we're talking about kind of the state of economics and politics right now. But this is one of the I think it's evil things that we do. And there's a lot of business executives that are in high places that do not like this and want this to change. And if they could, they would change it. But the problem is that it's always considered national defense. It's always considered strategy. It's always considered all these things. And then you get people in power that keep perpetuating this situation. And this is what we have going on.
It's funny how so often greed is tied to scarcity. It's as though people who are really greedy and selfish buy into the idea that they have to have all the marbles in their side. Whereas other people, I think that on a more spiritual level, if you like, believe that there's room for all of us.
Well, there is room for all of us. The earth has the resources to support everyone. But if you have certain people that want to hoard it and take it all, then it obviously doesn't. So we have to rethink, and we just can't be like that. Right. We have to be better.
I think that what we need to do is learn about the kind of state of mind, the state of spirit that we need in order to confront things. That's why I consider this program to be basically a kind of spiritual program, where the idea is if you can connect to that sort of treasure inside of yourself, then you will get the things and be able to do the things that you want. And I also believe that on a collective basis. If enough people... Go ahead.
Yes, I agree with you. I think that to fight this, I think people in leadership positions around our country who have the courage, they need to have the courage to do what's necessary to make this right. And that's what we are sort of lacking right now, is the courage to stand up to the people who are egomaniacs and the narcissists who are in power. And there are good people who are in power that understand this, and they need to have the courage to stand up and to do what's right. And until we have enough of those people doing that, it's not going to change. Because good, I believe, overall triumphs over evil, because the collective, people want to be in a collective good environment. We ended slavery. As we evolve as a species, we end the real bad stuff, but underlying there's always something else bad that happens. But it's the good and the will of the people and the good leaders that can come forward and have the courage, like I said, to do what's necessary.
We just need a strong, even if it's not a majority, a strong, educated, informed, and enlightened minority of people.
Yes.
Who are activists, who want to make things happen.
And there has to be enough of them to do it.
Well, I want to turn since we're talking about the economics still, I want to talk about the role of gold in the economy. It serves as a kind of safe haven for investors if the American currency collapses. Some say this is inevitable and gold investments are the answer right now. Is this thinking sound? And as your guest, Andy Hoffman, said, is it true that the price of gold has been perennially manipulated through the centuries as well as now?
Well, yeah, and that's the common wisdom, is that gold is being manipulated. Silver even more, and I think silver because it's a industrial metal. And because right now, historical ratios between gold and silver were always closer than what they are now. I think silver should be at about 50, 60, something like that, to have historical ratios with gold. But they're just being kept down. As Ed Moy, who was the director of the U.S. Mint under Obama and Bush, he's a great man. And he talked about the fact that gold is pretty much at the lowest point it could be because it's at the cost to mine the gold and distribute it. It can't really go any lower because that's how low it is.
It's lower than for a lot of small mining companies.
Yes.
It's lower than it needs to be, and that's why these junior mining companies go out of business a lot of times during these periods. And some of them are very clever, and they figure out a way to be more cost efficient, but they still need to sometimes bide their time until the price of gold goes up. Right now, it's fluctuating rather strongly.
Well, and so when there's so much demand for gold and the price is below the cost to, or at the cost to mine and manufacture and distribute for the large companies, not just, small companies have higher costs per unit. When it's at that, it's artificially low. I mean, supply demand, the whole market cycle is not working, right? Because if demand is high and the cost is at what it costs a large corporation to mine and distribute with very, very little profit, it's obviously not working properly. Right? Nobody's going to sell gold and these small companies below their cost. So there's something wrong. And so it's very clearly manipulated when it's below market demand.
Well, besides gold being a safe haven, there's another safe haven that's afoot, and that is cryptocurrencies. Now, I was involved in the barter industry for quite a number of years as a trade director, and I worked every day with legal alternative currency, which happened, I don't know, I guess in the 1990s, there was an agreement between the barter companies and the IRS that instead of, auditing all these people who remember barter companies, these people would hand in 1099s based on what they actually used in barter for their business. And so this has actually been a very strong part of this, a strong but minor part of our economy, alternative currency. Now, with the coming of Bitcoin, you're talking about something that alternative currency that has become a major event. And I think you have a discussion by the man you mentioned before, Ed Moy, the former director of the U.S. Mint, talking about this. Shall we listen?
Yes, let's go for it.
Based on that, are governments pretty receptive to Bitcoin, knowing that there's a little bit more transparency with those transactions?
Yes and no. So there are governments like Ecuador that have tried to develop their own version of Bitcoin, and there's a lot of reasons why they wanted to do that. Switzerland considered legislation last year that failed, but may come about this year that basically recognizes Bitcoin as another currency like it does the euro and the yen.
Sure.
And so there are countries that are really receptive to it. Great Britain, the Bank of England is considering developing their own cryptocurrency and using it to protect their pound sterling. The United States mainly has a wait-and-see attitude with all these agencies kind of figuring it out among themselves. And then there are other countries like China and Russia, and not surprisingly, they're very centralized governments. They are extremely suspicious, if not outright hostile, to decentralized currencies like cryptocurrencies.
So the United States is much more open to it than China and Russia.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that.
So are we moving towards a cashless society?
Well, there's certainly a lot of talk about it, and there's some economic factors that are interesting that are kind of accelerating this move. And so, just from a day-to-day perspective, Americans use a wide variety of payment mechanisms, right? We use credit cards, we use checks, we use cash, we use wire transfers, etc. But there are other countries like Denmark and Sweden and Norway who are trying to promote a cashless society. And when you take a look at like Sweden and Norway, they're very centralized governments that provide a lot of social benefits, and that type of approach to government leads them down the path of wanting a cashless society. And there's some benefits to that. Obviously, it's a lot easier swiping a credit card than it is counting out cash. Some would even make, the minor argument that because hands handle cash, then germs get transmitted, through cash transactions and things like that. But bottom line is that there are countries like Sweden and Norway that are exploring becoming completely cashless.
That's amazing.
Well, he's talking about what countries are for it and what aren't for it, and how they view cryptocurrencies. And cryptocurrencies in some countries, if you listen to this interview, which is a 2-part interview that I do with him, cryptocurrencies can do amazing things for like the unbankable countries where people don't have bank accounts, and so they can't do basic business transactions. It allows them to be able to do business and to make money and to buy food and to do all these things. So there's so many good things about it. So once you get past that, and you look at the big picture stuff, what's going on with it and why are they pushing it? Well, there's multiple facets to that. You look at Russia and China, and they're scared to death of it because they know that with some of the cryptocurrencies, they can't control it. It's completely distributed, and they're afraid of it, and they want to be able to control their centralized governments. They want to be able to control their stuff. But you look at the other spectrum of centralized governments, and they want to put their own cryptocurrencies in place. The socialist countries, because they want to control every bit of it and get every dollar of tax money and not allow any fraud and completely control their citizens. So there's a good and a bad with cryptocurrencies. If it gets implemented where the government controls it, they control everything. And what happens when the wrong actors in government gets in charge? I mean, that's what Thomas Jefferson and all these characters were worried about, in making sure there was a balance of power, because we all want to think that our government officials are angelic and they're great, but they're people. And so you get the wrong characters in Washington and wrong characters in charge of this stuff, and they can do some pretty bad stuff. And so you have to make sure that your currency has some freedom attached to it.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that happened in the barter industry, and I actually wrote a newsletter sort of about the entire barter industry, interviewing a lot of people who were running exchanges or dealt with exchanges, was that there was tremendous corruption in it because it wasn't regulated. There was a lot of fraud. I was in charge of an area for BXI where a lot of these trade directors had been dismissed because of things they did wrong, and sometimes because the company probably didn't understand what they were doing right. But so, it's a balance in everything, right, Sarah?
There's a balance, yeah. And that's what I talked to Ed Moy about that in that interview, is there's a way with like Bitcoin to get at some of the fraudulent transactions without taking away their right of freedom. And it's a very interesting conversation that we had about how do we create that balancing act where we can get the bad actors out of the system. I mean, nobody wants criminals. I mean, that's the point. Let's get these criminals out of the system. So if they're doing this fraud transactions, there's ways to get them out with cryptocurrencies while still maintaining your anonymous, not to have to be tracked for everything that you do. And so it's a very interesting conversation we had about how to manage cryptocurrencies in a way that benefits society without taking away your rights and freedoms.
Well, we have a clip here. It's not sort of on the broader sense about cryptocurrency, but it's very specific. But it's really, really a great little clip by one of the maybe the first inventor of the blockchain.
I know that the Chinese have been working on using supercomputing power to look for ways to crack the SHA family of hash values, and I believe Bitcoin uses the SHA-256. I use two separate hash functions simultaneously, which would make pedal considerably more difficult to forge or crack than Bitcoin.
So they could use your system for Bitcoin, couldn't they? If they ended up cracking the blockchaining that is used in Bitcoin, they could switch over to your system, and your system would be even more secure.
Somebody could do so, yes.
Wasn't that interesting?
Well, I really enjoyed talking to Kels Wilson. He is an amazing person. If you look at his background, he has PhDs in multiple disciplines, but he also went back and got his patent. He's a patent lawyer as well. And because he wanted to protect his own patents because he had different things that he's discovered and so forth. But he was the original inventor of blockchain. And there's an idea that there's a Japanese sounding name, and I don't have it right in front of me, that actually came up with blockchain, but it's not. It was actually Kels Wilson that came up with it, and he's used it. It's identical application of what they use in Bitcoin, but he uses it for another purpose. But his way of using it makes it completely impervious to hacking. Bitcoin is pretty hard to hack into, but he knows that, like China's feverishly trying to figure out how to hack into it. Like we talked about earlier with Ed Moy, they don't like the idea of Bitcoin. And so they're trying to figure out, how do we get into this currency? And I think they'll figure it out. But his way of doing it, and he explains it in the interview, is it's completely impervious. There's no way. And they can implement his stuff in Bitcoin and improve it to the point where no government could hack into it. And I think that's very, very interesting.
Following is a song recorded by Patricia Welch. It was written by myself as lyricist and by Edgar Ahrens, who both produced it, played it, and wrote the music. It's called Desperate Games.
Your shadow marks the brazen breeze. I sense you near and slowly freeze, tempted by your lips and your touch. The cup of you is way too much. I drink from you in sleep, in dreams, and mourn your loss in muffled screams, which sees the sweetness from the dawn and build new worlds with shadows spawn. No golden.
This is Johnny Bluestar. I've worked as a lyricist with Patricia Welch for over 5 years, along with Russian composer Edgar Ahrens, a friend and colleague. Her ability as a singer is simply amazing. She brings a unique and dramatic flair to every song she sings. Over the next few months, we shall be releasing a number of these songs, part of an album called Hadley's Castle. Meanwhile, Patricia has been busy creating a super enjoyable collection of classic standards in an exciting 46-song, 3-CD collection.
Music for great entertaining introduces Cocktails, Dinner, and Dessert with Patricia Welch. 3 hours of continuous music. 46 of the all-time classic standards, spanning decades of hit songs. Going to a friend's home for dinner? Cocktails, Dinner, and Dessert with Patricia also makes the perfect hostess gift. This 3-CD compilation is the perfect background music that sets just the right mood for any dinner party.
I'm crazy for feeling so lonely. There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy.
To purchase this album, just go to patriciawelch.com/CD. That is patriciawelch.com/CD. You won't be disappointed. Well, we've discussed a lot of different components of the economy. Certainly not everything, but certainly we do see more clearly how disruptive these type of policies and practices have, and some of the technology, which is, Bitcoin, which we just discussed. In our next hour, we're going to discuss more or less the political kind of disruption that's been going place. So we'll be right back you on Threshold Radio. New Galaxy Enterprises proudly presents Threshold Radio. This is Johnny Blue Star. Welcome to Threshold, a global media event. Is the universe just a random dance of atoms, or is it a manifestation of a supremely intelligent architect? Can its purpose, or our purpose here on Earth, be adequately assessed? Can we commune with it, know its intentions, cooperate with its direction? Here, we define threshold as a gateway state of awareness, allowing mankind to cross into a place of real cognition. Threshold allows us to approach questions of higher reality through the door of experience rather than mere belief. Welcome to Threshold, where we tear away the veil from commercial media, bringing our audience and participants into another realm of reality and enhanced communication. Initially, in the last hour, talking to Sarah Westall from Business Game Changers, her own radio show, we spoke of the problem with disinformation by muddying and distorting the situation of the economy. This disinformation is certainly disturbing, but its effect is magnified 100 times by the establishment press, which many of us see as controlled by giant corporations, wealthy individuals who control those stations, and governments whose agenda is often the byproduct of corporate special interests. Sarah, one of the things that you have done is interviewed the gentleman called the Dark Journalist, who we had a program on the private space program, which was very fascinating. But why don't we play the clip that you did about his point of view about what dark journalism is and what it has to do with real journalism that should be here?
Well, it's an excellent question. Dark journalism is basically, I see that it has to take the full spectrum of what is out there and not just the official story or the secondary kind of conspiracy theory. So a long time ago, I decided from analyzing news that I would split it up into 3 different categories. The official story would be the main category. Then the secondary part would be researchers who would take different aspects of the story and start to deconstruct the official story, because very often the official story would have holes in it. And then finally, the third piece was what I call the wild story, or junk conspiracy, which was intentionally thrown out there to throw everyone off and to keep supporting the official story. So the secondary story, which is often called the conspiracy theory, is this kind of dark journalism where people look at incidents like the crash of the economy in 2008. The official story on it was, well, there were some derivatives guys out there, and they got in there and they mucked up the financial works, and here we are. But as it turns out, some really good financial researchers went in there and said, actually, a lot of this was planned, and a lot of this was due to reckless investing, and some people were making money off this crash. And that became a kind of conspiracy theory, but actually, in truth, it was based on sound research, and so therefore it had more grounding in reality. And then the third thing that came up was people were saying all these wild things about, well, they need the money for FEMA camps, or, they're really taking it out there. And you find a lot of those stories are fueled by the same forces that put out the official story in the first place to kind of confuse the issue. And so dark journalism gets to the total picture. It's something where we need to look at the full spectrum in order to get real answers. We can't be afraid to go there.
So what did you think of that?
Well, Dark Journalist is a really interesting character because he goes into topics that most or many people will not go into, and he believes that you need to go there. You see his tagline is, we'll go there. And what that means is issues that a lot of people just are afraid to go there. You feel like you're going to be labeled a nut if you go there. But if he has legitimate, smart people who have really good facts, he'll go there and talk about almost anything. And he dives into topics. And some of the people that he has are almost all of the people he have are amazing individuals high up in governments, scientists, PhDs, really interesting people. And he talks about things that, a lot of people won't go there. He'll talk about abductions, and he'll talk about the JFK assassination. People do talk about the assassination, but he'll talk to high-level officials that were involved with the JFK assassination and go there. He'll ask all the deep questions. But I also wanted to talk to him about journalism in general, because there's this people are noticing, and you go on YouTube, you go other places, you see all these conspiracy theories and all these alternative media things that are talking about all sorts of weird things. And I wanted his view on what he thought of that. And this is what that clip is about, how there's like 3 different levels of things. There's the official view. There's what he dubs, the dark journalism, where you actually go and you dig up the truth and you figure out really what's going on. And then there's the conspiracy theories that are led by nuts and by the official people who are trying to spin things to make, to have people go in wrong directions and to make the legitimate stories seem like it's goofy. They'll take
I really believe that's true. Particularly like in the area of the private space program, but also in some of these very strange stories about our government controlling time travel, having interstellar capacities for traveling to the stars, and certainly inhabiting Mars in great quantities of population, that I think are not coming from anybody who even believes them, but are very cleverly fashioned.
Well, because then they make people look like bozos, right? They try to get it far out there, but then they display it in ways that seem really smart and things. And so then it discredits everybody in that whole genre.
Another thing that's really disturbing is something that is spoken of by Delphine Hagan in one of your interviews, because our press is not being protected anymore. And this is a tremendously interesting clip. Let's play it.
It's true that we have observed many things these recent years which are concerning in regard of press freedom in a democracy like the US. And really our main concerns, and which explain this ranking at the 49th position, are, if we want to sum up, are 2 main things. First, we have observed in the recent years many times journalists have been arrested while covering demonstrations. So last year it was especially during the protest in Ferguson. So we at least 15 journalists were arbitrarily arrested during the confrontation between the police and the demonstrators.
And even if they are clearly marked as journalists, they still get arrested?
Yes, there's been many cases of journalists clearly identified as journalists. The police knew they were journalists, but they were arrested. So, which is just things which should not happen in a democracy. And unfortunately, we have seen that in 2014, but we continue to see that this year in 2015. So that's one concerns which really remain high. But the other main concern is really what we called here kind of war against journalist sources or war against whistleblowers. You probably know that the Obama administration has prosecuted 8 alleged whistleblowers, which is the highest number under any previous administration combined.
And what are they prosecuting them for?
So they're prosecuting them under the Espionage Act. So making the point that leaking valuable information to journalists is an act of espionage. So this is a first concern for us. But what is really concerning for us in regards of press freedom is that in a country where almost all information related to national security is classified and secret.
Exactly.
The only way to know another part of the story than the official PR press conference truth is leaks. Leaks are really the lifeblood of investigative journalists.
I'm particularly affected by what you said about the Patriot Act.
Well, I think people have heard of Reporters Without Borders, and they put out the Freedom of the Press Index. And I wanted to talk to her because the United States is now at 49th out of, 180 countries or 149 countries, something like that. We're not doing so hot on the freedom of the press. And her role in that organization is she's the head of the U.S. division. And so I wanted her input on why are we like that and what's really going on. And the main reason why we've dropped so far in the press index is because our persecution of whistleblowers. The current administration has persecuted more whistleblowers under this administration than all past administrations combined. And they do it under the Patriot or the Espionage Act and claim that they are, it's illegal because they're doing illegal espionage, when really it's just normal journalism. And like she says, when we have a country that takes everything and says it's top secret for national security, how are we ever supposed to get to the truth? Leaks are how you do journalism. And so how are we supposed to get to the alternative story versus the official story? Because so often the official story is what they need, to spin and do what they need to do. But if we don't have the real story out there, how do we keep them in check?
Do you remember the movie called The Insider with Russell Crowe? Did you ever see that movie?
I remember it. I don't know if I saw it.
It's about a scientist who is disaffected by what's going on inside a tobacco company. It's a true story.
Yes.
Yeah, with Al Pacino. It's a really. I'm actually in the process of watching it, and it has always moved me tremendously. But after all that, he didn't get on 60 Minutes with the real stuff. All the things he went through, and it shows you how tied up. Even then, that the press is tied up with the corporate stuff, and 60 Minutes was probably one of the more liberated types of programs.
Well, that's why alternative media is so important right now. The internet is so important, but we have to keep it like that. And the more people that realize that there's alternative sources and realize what sources are legitimate and what ones aren't, it's so important for our freedom.
That's a tough one because it's often not so simple to tell anything like that.
It's not. It's not.
We're going to go to a break now, and we'll be right back. This next song is called My Heart Is Ready. It was originally composed by Edgar Ahrens as a kind of spiritual song, but later was modified when we turned it into an English song called My Heart Is Ready. It still has that spiritual quality, and it still seems like one's heart, yes, it may be open in a romantic way, but it's also seemingly capable of listening to the song as one's heart is opening to God. It's sung by Patricia Welch. Here it is.
The moon hangs low in the sky. I'm back again on this path. I scatter petals along down moonlight silver above.
I've worked with Russian composer Edgar Ahrens for quite a few years, building an inventory of songs, many of which feature singer-performer Patricia Welch. We will soon be releasing these songs, components of an album and a musical in progress called Hadley's Castle. When Edgar and I first got together, I was amazed by the brilliance of his musical scores created for movies, TVs, and animations. Here is a sample of the work he did on the Russian TV series, available now on Amazon, called The Secret Agent's Memoir, which had 2 seasons. This score is called Escape and was created for the first season. I am very pleased to say that Bridge of Light Productions, a division of New Galaxy Enterprises, is proud to be the contact point for television and film companies seeking information about this amazing composer's work. If you are in the entertainment business and wish to know more, contact me at johnnybluestar@gmail.com. That's johnnybluestar@gmail.com. If you like Threshold Radio, a program which deals with core issues affecting our personal, political, and spiritual lives, and advocates the creation of an enlightened, informed citizenry, not only in America, but throughout the world, then you might think of supporting both your product and business and our message by advertising on our show. All programs are archived and are supported in various ways, including social media, our outreach being broadcast weekly on VegasAllNetRadio.com, a very advanced internet broadcasting station, but also archived directly on our websites on YouTube and in SoundCloud. We believe in time we will have a very broad outreach. Through New Galaxy Enterprises, our parent company, we can create a wide range of marketing and advertising components to complement your advertising on Threshold Radio and increase your outreach in many creative and exciting ways. If interested, just go to www.thresholdradio.com and fill out a contact form with your interest. That's www.thresholdradio.com. Perhaps the most serious aspect of what we've been talking about so far, which is the sort of the politicalization, perhaps the most serious part of this distortion of information about politics and the use of propaganda and misdirection, is the creation of endless wars. Perhaps 2 of the gravest examples of this were the various stories told about 9/11, which has led to massive surveillance and the destruction of whatever was left of the pleasure of airline travel, as well as the Iraqi war. Of course, this also led, and insofar as it led to the war against Iraq, that was permeated with rather large fibs dealing with the reality of weapons of mass destruction. At least that's my take on it, Sarah. What do you think?
Well, they had other agendas of why they wanted to go in there, and they needed a reason. End of story.
And then you go into the things that happened with Hillary Clinton. There are many people who have assaulted her for her actions in Benghazi, but one of the things that they claimed, and I'm not saying it's true, was that she was hiding her attempts to arm some of the dissidents who were affiliated with al-Qaeda in an effort to overthrow Assad. So again, you have at least that kind of nebulous possible connection between covert actions and things that we see on the surface, like, there was a video that these people were angry about, and so they attacked us, which was probably totally discredited. And then there was this covert thing, just like in the emails that are being distributed, and say, well, for sure we know that some of this was to hide the intrusions on the campaign of Bernie Sanders, but there's also the claim that it was to hide some of the actions of the relationship between her job and the Clinton Foundation, which is even more serious.
The Clinton Foundation is a pretty serious issue, as far as manipulate. It's what we're talking about with the John Perkins, the economic hitman. It's at that level. It's that stuff. It's a giant. If it's true, and I'm reading for the second time, I'm reading Clinton Cash. I'm looking at it very carefully. It's just gigantic. I'm not saying it's true. I'm not making that allegation because it's very hard to actually
be enough of an investigative reporter that you can really say
exactly
something with the strength that, say, Seymour Hersh will say something.
Well, and that's the problem, is that her position and what she's trying to go for is a very powerful position. So you have enemies everywhere trying to take you down, and people will go to all lengths to take you down. So it's important to weed through all that, right?
And there's so much to weed through. You're talking about billions of dollars to weed through.
Well, it's hard. Trump is the same way. He's being attacked like crazy. People are making things up. He's attacking like crazy. It's really difficult to know whether it's spin or truth, or whether anything's true, especially in politics.
One thing is that he says he has no bankruptcies, and
not personal bankruptcies.
As I understand it, he had. Like, if I was making a motion picture, I would do it like everyone else does. I'd create an LLC, and the investors would know if it didn't work out, they'd lose their investment, and I wouldn't be personally liable. And I'm sure that's kind of the sort of bankruptcies he had. Maybe sometimes they didn't know, but the point is that so he can say one thing and it'll be true, and in another level it won't be
she's
true.
The same way. Any business person, any entrepreneur that started multiple companies, the businesses have gone through bankruptcy. There's very few entrepreneurs that have avoided bankruptcy at some point in their life. Right now, the problem is if you use that as a tool to enrich yourself, and if you have a pattern of doing that, and that's where the problem lies. And I mean, I don't know if he has or has not, because I haven't dug into it. But to just vilify somebody for going through bankruptcy is not appropriate, because that's why it's in place. And most successful entrepreneurs have had to go through something like that.
But if you say that you haven't, that's another thing, and you don't clarify it.
Well, exactly. Well, he hasn't personally, but his businesses have, and it's a little bit not truthful, but they're all like that. You can dig into Clinton. A lot of the stuff she says isn't, you're like, well, that's not really true, right?
Well, yeah, but how much should we excuse them?
I'm not, there's no excuse for it. I'm just,
I mean, it's just that it's so commonplace.
It's not right. And if you are straightforward and you say it, then they cream you over it.
Well, now we're going to turn to another point that Naomi Wolf brings up. And, I really think that this point that she's going to make about sort of state secrets and black budgets is very, very important. So let's hear this tape.
I honestly think the Patriot Act is the most damaging set of authorizations, and it keeps coming up and being reauthorized.
And why is that so dangerous?
Well, for the reasons that we've been talking about, Sarah.
I know some of the answers, but I want you to, right? I'm not that ignorant.
I can't believe that years later we're still talking about the Patriot Act. I sort of thought, surely in America, this will be gone in a week and a half, or by next year, surely. I mean, it's so dangerous because it makes us not ourselves. In a nutshell, it's so dangerous because it allows for perpetual war, perpetual surveillance, perpetual suspension of due process. We've still got a gulag in Cuba where 170 men have not been charged or tried.
That's awful.
Yes.
That's so bad.
Not what Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and George Washington and all the unnamed female patriots and, patriots of color at the time intended for our country to be.
So, Sarah, what do you think about this?
Well, this is, it's kind of a sad commentary again. This is a loss of our republic. And this is what she's trying to say. And we talked about it a lot, and we all remember talking about it a lot 5 years ago, or I think it was about 5 years ago, but we haven't talked about it since. Maybe it was since 2001 it came out, so maybe it's been a decade now, but it's dying down. People aren't talking about it anymore. And that's a scary thing. She says we're still talking about it, but not like we did, right? She thought it would be gone, like it was just there temporarily. No, now it's a part of our republic, and that fundamentally changed who we are. And we have to look at that.
Yes, we do. Well, another point about this, and this is really interesting, because you're going to speak again with Michael John. Is that his name?
Michael Johns.
Talking a little bit about taxes. Let's hear what he has to say about the situation about the taxation situation in our country?
Well, this is really a sign of our times. You know, the fight of the 1% against the rest of us. You know, back in 1929, before the collapse and the Depression, the wealth disparity was huge, and it was the largest it's ever been in the history. Well, now we're back at that point, and I think we're beyond that now, and it's an unhealthy place to be. And and so people are complaining that they're not being taxed enough, but what they're doing is they're pointing figures in the wrong direction.
You mean they're being taxed too much?
The wealthy aren't being taxed. Well, both are saying the opposite stuff. Democrats are saying the wealthy aren't being taxed enough. The Republicans are saying they're taxed enough already, right? Well, now you got to go, okay, well, what's really the truth? Well, if you look at corporations we have the highest tax rate in the world.
Yeah, but we have also probably, in most cases, the major corporations not paying anywhere near that because of loopholes.
Well, now that's another situation. Now that's
that is
factor.
a definite. I mean, that's a definite factor.
No, it's a huge factor. So no, but what that factor is that's loopholes in the tax code. Okay, so now we have small businesses, middle-sized businesses, ones that are not connected to the power structure, paying through the nose in taxes.
Yeah, right.
And then we have, which is not right, which is holding people down and keeping that disparity large, right? If we can get small businesses and middle-sized businesses making money and thriving, more money goes out to the middle class and thriving keeps us moving along. Whereas the large corporations who are actually becoming international, who are really international companies, are the ones who are getting all these loopholes and tax breaks. And so much of I have another interview with Alan Walensky, who was the assistant tax secretary under George Bush. And what he talks about is that the tax code is really where a lot of legislation occurs, because it's so hard to get laws passed through Congress. So all these loopholes and all these incentives are being put in the tax code. The problem is when you have lobbyists and you have all these people with influence, they're getting their own loopholes put in there and they're not paying taxes. But why are we incenting international companies who are taking their dollars and investing elsewhere and having them not pay taxes on local profits? That, what's that? So, there's issues. Well, we shouldn't be taxing our little companies and our middle-sized companies to death.
Well, we're going to, on that score, we're going to take a little bit of a break and be right back. This next song is called Palm Springs Lullaby. I composed the lyrics, and the music was written and produced by Edgar Ahrens, also a wonderful musician, and sung by Patricia Welch. It kind of expresses the way I felt when I came to Palm Springs in the first place, but exaggerated. There's kind of a almost desperate kind of feeling to the song, almost like there's a serious chase involved. But I did use that feeling I had of escaping to a place that was almost miraculously beautiful from a place that was not so pleasant. It's called Palm Springs Lullaby.
Escaping from the dawn, we flee to desert skies. The final dance is on, with no more alibis. As windmills madly spin, our dreams from lovesick sighs. Their dancing shadows win a gleam from downcast eyes, rippling through the desert.
This is Johnny Bluestar. I've worked as a lyricist with Patricia Welch for over 5 years, along with Russian composer Edgar Ahrens, a friend and colleague. Her ability as a singer is simply amazing. She brings a unique and dramatic flair to every song she sings. Over the next few months, we shall be releasing a number of these songs, part of an album called Hadley's Castle. Meanwhile, Patricia has been busy creating a super enjoyable collection of classic standards in an exciting 46-song, 3-CD collection.
Music for Great Entertaining introduces Cocktails, Dinner, and Dessert with Patricia Welch. 3 hours of continuous music. 46 of the all-time classic standards, spanning decades of hit songs. Going to a friend's home for dinner? Cocktails, Dinner, and Dessert with Patricia also makes the perfect hostess gift. This 3-CD compilation is the perfect background music that sets just the right mood for any dinner party.
I'm crazy for feeling so lonely. There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy.
To purchase this album, just go to patriciawelch.com/CD. That is patriciawelch.com/CD. You won't be disappointed.
Boots in Manhattan is a coming-of-age novel by Ray Boylan and Johnny Bluestar. It is about a young Tom Boots Raymond who grows up in New York in the 1940s who was a member of a street gang.
My friends and I were about to start our own game of stickball when Rabbit Lacey, the head of the Rattlers, came up to us and tried to move in on our game. We were called Dwarves, the youngest members of this stupid gang.
Hey, Kevin, I need you to get some gloves and some stuff I left at my place.
No, this is our game.
Hey, are you my good little dwarf or what?
You've been calling me a dwarf since I was 6. We're not your personal slaves, pal.
Hey, what is this? A dwarf rebellion? All right, big guy. We ditched the dwarf thing. We make you guys regular rattlers.
No, it's too late.
He looked at Jay and me. We looked away. Rabbit was now angry, and he pushed Kevin hard with the palms of his hand. Kevin tried to ram him in the stomach, but he stepped aside, throwing Kevin into the curb where he fell to the ground, bleeding profusely at the knee. Still, he managed to get up.
My street.
Kevin shouted at Rabbit, pointing at him with an angry index finger.
Find out more by Googling Boots in Manhattan, a 1940s coming-of-age novel, part 1 of the novel series The Foot Soldier by Ray Boylan and Johnny Bluestar. Google with the words Boots in Manhattan, Ray Johnny Kindle. That's Boots in Manhattan, Ray Johnny Kindle.
This is Johnny Bluestar back with Sarah Westall discussing disruption in politics and economy. At least that's what we've been talking about so far. But, these are largely negative type of disruption, unfortunately. I would like to say that they're not, but they are. So right now, Sarah has not just invested herself in the via negativa, but has also been really involved in trying to find sources of disruption that are absolutely positive. Tell us about some of these things that you've discovered.
Well, there's amazing things going on. We're just in an amazing part of history right now. Sure, there's lots of stuff going on politically, economically, and part of it is we're starting to understand what's going on because we have this internet, which allows communication. It's it's a lot like the printing press. When the printing press came around, instead of it being just the information being kept amongst the elites, now everybody was able to read books and get information. Well, this is that on hyperdrive. Instead of a one-way interaction with books, it's a multiple interaction. So everybody's being able to interact with everybody, and communication is lightning speed. And so it's just this renaissance of information. And so it's fundamentally changing the way we are as people. And it's an exciting time to be alive. Yes, there's issues with politics and economics. There's issues with, the technology. The technology in the military is scary, right? We while we can do amazing things with our health and we can do amazing things with each other and we can live better, we can also hurt ourselves much easier. And that's something that we have to be careful of. We know enough to be dangerous concept. But at the same time, when you look at where we were hundreds of years ago compared to where we are now, there's a statistician out of, gosh, I can't remember what country he is from, but I have it on my website, or I used to have it on my website. I'm going to put it back up so people can see it. But it's 3 years. It's 200 countries in 200 years, or it's at 300 countries in 300 years and 3 minutes, something like that. And it shows the advancement of humankind over those centuries, and how much our health and our wages have gone up, and how much our just living has improved. And so when you start looking at the advancements of technology now, when you look at healthcare, the ability for us to look at human adult stem cells and regrow muscle tissue, that kind of stuff. And people are getting out of wheelchairs. The problem is we still have a lot of politics and economic issues where it's illegal in this country, but legal all over Europe and Japan, but not here in the United States.
You're talking about adult stem cells, right?
Yes, adult stem cells. There's so many advancements in medicine that is just amazing. There's pillars of excellence all over the world, not just in the United States, but other places in the world. And we're making huge advancements. We've come so far at understanding cancer. People have to get out of their box that they're in this country and realize that there's other things going on around the world. Huge advancements in medicine that can really alter people's lives in positive ways. There's people working on aging. They think it's a disease. They've come to the point where they're really making strides on different aspects of aging so that we can live so much longer and so much better. It's just fascinating how much better we are today. You couple that with all the bad stuff that we hear on a daily basis, and yeah, there is a lot of bad stuff, but we've overcome slavery, right? Still, there's slavery in the world, but not like it was. It's not like it used to be. We're so much better off, and things are getting better. But, it's a constant struggle, and we all have to work together to make it better. But there's so many positive things going on. 3D printing of tissue. How amazing is that? They have hyper realistic holograms where they can bring people like Michael Jackson, and I had an interview on this with the head of the medical unit of this, the people that own the Michael Jackson and the Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley images, and they're so hyper realistic that it looks like they're actually on stage, performing like they never died. It's
right.
amazing.
I see. Yes.
It's amazing. And they're able to do political speeches. Like, let's say somebody is in Washington and they want to do speeches all around the country at the same time, and they put them up on stage and it looks like they're there with you. You can't tell the difference.
Well, virtual reality is going to... There are two things that I see coming as extraordinary differences. And one of them is virtual reality basically inserting itself into everything that we do. And the second thing is robots.
Well, robots, yes. It's the interesting part of how we get robots to work, the technology behind that, the thinking behind that, and what they can actually accomplish, which is fascinating. But what I think is even more fascinating is our ability to tap into our own neurology, into our own spine and all of our nerves and our brain, and be able to, for example, project images right from our brain. Like if we have a video on Mars, they can project it right to our brain like we're seeing it ourselves from Mars.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now, how fascinating would that be? Like, okay, they also have, what do you call it? Like like suits that you can get onto that makes it seem like you're actually touching something. It's pressurized. So if you have an image going through your brain, making it look like you're actually there, and you have a suit on that makes you feel like you're there, are you there mentally? You feel like you are. They're getting to the point where they can do some of that stuff, and that's where it's really amazing.
Well, it's going to be rather strange, though, if at some point in the near future, after this has been rooted more in our culture, that people start to get born with very large heads.
Like our anatomy changes, yeah.
And we start slowly turning gray and having trouble reproducing in the real world because we're doing all this stuff virtually.
Yeah. Well, I think people will get addicted to it, yes. But there's some positives too. I mean, think about going into a health club that's all virtual reality, and we can do sports how we want to.
Yeah,
get into shape. And
it's like everything else. It's a two-edged sword.
Yes, it is.
You know, I'm drinking coffee now. That's a two-edged sword.
Well, caffeine, they think caffeine's not that bad for you.
And that depends on the
Yes, it
era
does.
of the science.
It really does. In another 10 years, they're going to think it's awful for you and you got to stop drinking it again.
Yeah. Well, you know, Sarah, I'd like you to talk a little bit about where things are going for you in Business Game Changers and, you know, how to access it. Because I'll tell you now, I've heard more about it. I think I'm going to have to take off a month and just listen to it continually and get all your archives properly invested.
Well, let me tell you,
understanding.
if you sit and listen to all my shows, the amount of learning that you'll do is absolutely through the roof. It's absolutely amazing. I will tell you, there's nothing out there, there's nothing out there that's better than this archive. It is absolutely amazing. I go and I listen to some older interviews and I can't believe what I learn again. I'm talking to the best experts in the world on subjects that are on the edge of where we're at. And it's absolutely amazing. And if you really want to learn, you listen to some of these shows. It's incredible. And where I'm going is, you know, I find myself being pulled a little bit more into political and economic stuff because people are really interested in that. But I want to still keep that balance of, documenting the edge of what's going on and talking to the brilliant people around the world. I call it business game changers because everything's related to business in some way. If you can't make money on it, unfortunately, things don't go forward. But things that are worthwhile for society, there's always a way to put money behind it and back it and make it work for us.
So where does it go next? I mean, tell us about where it's being broadcast right now.
Well, right now it's out of New York, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, and it airs all over Long Island, and it also gets into Manhattan. So it's a great place that it's airing. And then it's also streams live on multiple channels, including Transformation Talk Radio. Transformation Talk Radio is growing super fast. It was created by Dr. Pat, the woman that does the Dr. Pat show. And she is a #1 positive talk show in Seattle, and she's syndicated all over the world. And she created this Transformation Talk Radio, and I am doing the Conscious Business Radio to help really grow that. And I like being on that network. They won the International Stevie Award for Best Team, and so I like working with the people. But their goal is to transform lives in a positive way. And so I like being part of something like that. But of course, I'm kind of my own entity in and of itself, and I'm growing my own thing. My goal is to be the place that leaders go to figure out what's going on. I want to be a source for leaders in this country. I want my archives to be a source for leaders. And I don't want to just do things that are for publicity's sake. I don't want to get just, I know it's going to get the ratings, so I'm going to bring somebody in to talk about something that's really juicy. I want to bring things in that really educate and inspire people with the top minds in the world. And that's my goal.
And what a great goal that is. I think that it's been a real pleasure to have you on today. We have been speaking about, I think, really important things, as we always have when we have roundtables or other programs that you contribute to. So I hope that everybody out there will keep in mind that the people who create alternative media are also the people who may create an alternative to help create an alternative to the mess that we're in right now. I started Threshold Radio with the idea that it would promote a way of looking and analyzing the world from a spiritual point of view. But besides a talk radio show, I wanted it to be a platform for original music that would be produced by singers, songwriters, musicians, and composers that felt that music was transformatory, that it could be an instrument of change. In accordance with my personal goal to create music of this nature and to create an association of musical talent of like mind, I call this subdivision of my company Bridge of Light Productions, as though a bridge of light would extend throughout the planet Earth and fill it with light, a kind of conduit for this wonderful music that we would create. So far, the participants in the musical side of Threshold are Edgar Ahrens, Patricia Welch, Patty Greer, Stephanie Slevin, Zave Nathan, and Bonnie Blazak. None of this would be possible, neither Bridge of Light, nor New Galaxy Enterprises, nor Threshold Radio, without the assistance of Hassan Khan, a director of technical services. Hassan is also a guitar player and flautist, whose work you will be hearing soon on this program. Today we're going to leave with two very powerful and transformatory songs, Change by Zave Nathan and Bonnie Blazak, and We Want Our Planet Back by Patty Greer. So thank you for coming, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much.
That in the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists. In the midst of darkness, light persists.
Genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and build a better life for their children. Peace for all men and women, peace in all time.
Everyone is waking up, and the animals are strong. Nature needs rebounding, so we're wishing on the stars. I'm just a kid at heart, and that is where we start. Who's in charge here? Who's in charge here? Let's do it differently. It's sickening all the people, and it's killing all the trees. It's falling in our eyes, and it's getting harder to see the beauty that is our world, and the freedom to be free. It's landing in the water. We know it's in the air. It's time for you and me to show we care. Say no to GMOs hiding in our food, and no to fluoride in our water too. Who's in charge here? Who's in charge here? Let's save this family and do what's right for Earth and you and me. Step into the new way, where we live in harmony. No more war, no more fracking. We are free. Charge here. Who's in charge? Let's do it differently. Sickening all the people, and it's killing all the trees. It's falling in our eyes, and it's getting harder to see the beauty that is our world, and the freedom to be free.